Good evening. Before we get started, I want to hand it over to Mr. Murphy to discuss tonight's broadcast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just asked to indicate that because of the weather, we have 2 viewing opportunities that are not available at the moment. Those include our Granicus, which is when you look at the watch the meeting from the county's website, and then our YouTube channel. Again, due to the weather, those services are out with our IT department and are not available to watch the meeting. The meeting is still being broadcast on KGov, and I can tell you that once the weather allows and our IT can take the necessary measures, the meeting is still being recorded and it will be placed on YouTube and Granicus once we can. But just for immediate tonight, at the moment, those opportunities are not available to view the meeting at this time.
Thank you. This meeting of the Kern County Planning Commission is called to order. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Ashley? Commissioner Dunbar?
Here.
Commissioner Nance?
Here.
Commissioner Oliver?
Here.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Here.
Mr. Van White?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Ms. Simon?
Here.
Hey, commission member announcements or reports. Would any commissioner or staff like to make an announcement or report? I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to introduce to your commission, since your last meeting, the county has hired a second assistant director. So Paul Johnson has come back to the county from the city. He worked here first, then he worked at the city, and now he is coming back to the county. Mr. Johnson will oversee our newly created housing division, which we are currently in the process of forming. He's going to oversee our counter operations. He's going to oversee our community development program, so that's the CDBG funding and things along those lines. And him and his staff will be the lead as we kind of go forward with the update of our general plan and things along those lines. So Mr. Johnson will be attending in these meetings more often, and so we thought it was appropriate that he come in. So if you haven't met him, you know who he is. So we are excited to have Mr. Johnson back at the county. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Johnson. Approval of minutes. You have received copies of the minutes of the January 23rd meeting. Are there any corrections? If no corrections, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Items withdrawn or requests for continuance. So we have none. Consent items. So we have none. Public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter that's not on tonight's agenda and over which the commission has jurisdiction. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state your name for the record before making your presentation. Do we have anybody like to speak? Okay, moving on. Public hearing. First item you will hear tonight, item number 1 on the regular agenda, is the applicant or the representative present. Okay. Is there anybody here that wants to speak either for or against the project? Okay. I'd like to move to staff. Will you give the staff report presentation for this application?
Good evening, Chair Dunbar and Commissioners. This proposal is a request for a change in zone classification of a 9.04 acre parcel. The parcel is split zoned and has 2 map code designations. The request is to change the zone classification on the northern portion of the parcel from estate 10-acre residential suburban combining with an R1 low-density residential in suspense to R2 medium-density residential. The southern portion of the parcel will be changed from estate 10-acre residential suburban combining with estate quarter-acre in suspense to estate quarter-acre. The applicant is Airstar Properties, LLC.
Ms. Parker, I'm sorry, if the clerk could get the maps on the overhead?
The project site is located on the east side of Jewetta Avenue, approximately 240 feet south of the Hageman Road intersection. The parcel is undeveloped vacant land and the surrounding area is comprised of residential parcels of varied densities. A zone change for this project site was previously approved by the Kern County Board of Supervisors on September 11th in 2007. The proposal at that time intended to develop the project site as a residential development and included an abutting parcel to the east that is not being considered in this request. That approved zone change was only to become effective upon recordation of a final subdivision map. Comments received during the notification period for this project included standard comments from county agencies and comments from 2 members of the public that were in opposition to the request. The concerns expressed included the alteration of the existing character of the neighborhood, devaluation of the property values in the area, the density increase, and long-term impacts on current residents in the area. The area surrounding the project site is a mix of estate-zoned properties in the county and within the city of Bakersfield, as well as single-family and multifamily residential developments north of Hageman Road. The applicant has proposed that the southern portion of the project site that abuts estate quarter-acre properties to also be zoned estate quarter-acre. While the applicant has expressed an interest in developing the property with single-family and multifamily dwellings, to date no tract or parcel map has been submitted in conjunction with this proposal. Should this proposal be approved by your commission and then approved by the Board of Supervisors, the applicant will be required to submit a land division application for any future development of the property for residential use. The concern of property values in the area being reduced by this zone change request is a speculative assumption at this time without further data or information submitted for staff review. To the concern about the increase in density, the proposed request would allow the opportunity for the 9-acre site to be developed with both single-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings. The goals and provisions of the Kern County Housing Element encourages adequate sites be designated for a variety of new housing opportunities. This consideration is supported by the goals and policies of the Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan. To the impacts on existing residents, as part of the preliminary review process, the applicant was required to prepare and submit a trip generation analysis. Jewetta Avenue is located within the jurisdiction of the City of Bakersfield, and that analysis was sent to the City of Bakersfield for review. City staff from the Traffic Engineering Division of the city determined the analysis did not exceed 50 peak hour trips, and therefore further analysis would not be required. The project will be required at the time of development, should this be approved, to pay regional transportation impact fees. The map code designation for the northern part of the parcel is low-medium density residential, less than or equal to 10 dwelling units per net acre. The LMR designation supports single-family townhomes, duplexes, and small multifamily units like triplexes. With this information, staff believes this project proposal will not create long-term impacts for the surrounding area. Staff is advising your commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors approve the zone change as requested, enact ordinance, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Does the applicant want to come up, have any opening statement or comments?
Good evening, Chairman Dunbar and honorable commissioners. I'm Jeff Gutierrez. I'm representing the applicant. I'm with DeWalt Corporation. First, I'd like to commend staff, especially Logan Clairday. He was responsive to me every chance that I reached out to him about this action. And on Monday, early Monday morning, he got me the staff report. And he even called me today to remind me about this Planning Commission meeting. So I appreciate his diligence. I think most of what I'm going to say is I'm going to agree with staff's report. With respect to what they said in their staff report about housing density, I agree with staff that the zone change request is consistent with the Kern County housing element, and that the Kern County housing element recommends that suitable infill locations like this one be designated for a variety of housing opportunities and types. That they allow for development of both single and multifamily dwelling units, and that they're sensitive to what's around them, like our quarter-acre designation to the neighbors in the south, which buffers them from the multifamily which we're doing in the north. With respect to environmental review, I agree with staff that the site is consistent with the Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan, and in as much as the request does not include a general plan amendment, is exempt from an environmental document as per CEQA's special situation guidelines. With respect to general plan consistency, I agree with staff that the application is consistent with the general plan and is supported by the surrounding land uses. We recognize that the requested zone change would make possible the implementation of the general plan's goals and policies, like Goal 3, which accommodates compatible development that complements existing land use. Policy 2, which allows for a variety of residential types and densities. Policy 13, which requires multifamily residential projects to integrate design features that promote compatibility with adjacent existing single-family residential housing. And Policy 14, which requires multifamily residential projects to be adequately set back from the street. We'll have that possibility with the zone change to do all of those things. With respect to zoning consistency, I agree with staff's opinion that the site for the requested zone change is in compliance with the zone district of the area and the Kern County zoning ordinance. This site is well suited for this zone change because of the adequacy of the size of the parcel, the fact that we're matching zoning with the neighbors to the south, and that the multi-family zoning to the north is buffered, is closer to the multifamily, which is at Hageman and Jewetta, and is buffering the quarter-acre lots to the south. My last point that I'm going to bring up is to address one of the neighbors' concerns. And if we could show the drawing. This is our current concept plan for what we're going to do. We had a neighbor comment in a letter that they didn't want us to connect to Eden Street. Eden Street goes to the south there. This plan is flexible. we could put a knuckle there instead of that connection to Eden Street, and it would still be basically the same plan. And I think that our connection to Jewetta in two places would be satisfactory for fire and trash and flow of traffic. So the client, he's kind of indifferent about whether we connect to Eden Street or not. So I just wanted to point that out. We're not doing land division at this point, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we were sensitive to the neighbors' comments. I'm here for questions if you have any, and that's what I've got for you.
Thank you. I invite those who are opposed to this request to come forward and be heard. Please state your name for the record.
My first name is Maricela, it's spelled Marycela. My last name is Tamez, T like in Tom, Amez. I own and I live in a house on Polson Way. I moved out there in 1990, took my life savings to pay that house off, and I'm opposed. I haven't done my homework on everything. I'm kind of out of my element here, but what I'm hearing does sound like the homework was done very well by the Planning Commission, done very well by the developer. So I have to defer to their logic. I can only tell you that the impacts that happened from 90 till when it became from county to city affected our quality of life. My children couldn't ride their horses out there anymore. They couldn't ride their dirt bikes anymore. The street off of Eden was opened up. Traffic has been horrible down on Polson Way. My address is 11216 Polson Way. And all these promises were made then. Back in 2006 or 7 when it was approved, my mother was dying, so I didn't come to that meeting. Now I'm aware of this. I'm going to do some more homework. I'm opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Doug Clark. If you look at the map that's up there at the end of the cul-de-sac that backs up to Jewetta, I'm the lower house there that, no, the cul-de-sac up at the upper left. Cul-de-sac, it's a circle. There you go, right about there. That's my house right there. So my house would be impacted, I feel, with the streets exiting right there. There's going to be more noise. That can be disputed, but I believe there'd be more noise. There'd be more traffic. When I bought in that area, I've been there 21 years. I bought in that area after exploring it very carefully, and I liked what I saw with the density. To go from what it is right now to what they're suggesting, that's a pretty big leap, in my opinion. I've also heard the argument that there's already an apartment building nearby. I don't see the logic there. How does that justify adding more high-density housing? It doesn't mean the neighborhood should accommodate more just because, hey, it's already there. I don't believe that argument holds. I'm not against development. I would welcome a project, but I would only welcome it if it more closely aligns with what the existing zoning is. To make the leap to what it is now, I just don't agree with that. As to the planning, I just was shown a suggested whatever they were going to come up with, and another concern would be, what do we hold them to? If this zoning gets changed to higher density, can then they change their mind and go with multi-story? I don't know that. I didn't have time to study that. It's just that the current zoning was put there, I believe, for a reason. That neighborhood should we should honor that promise that the zoning laws give us, and I feel very strongly about that. I'm opposed. If they can come up with a better plan, that's fine, but I feel that's just too high of density for that area, and especially how it would impact myself and my neighbors with just a wall. Our backyards would become noisy and it would be disruptive. That's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? I invite those in support of the request to come forward and be heard. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Brian Haupt. I'm with a company called ASU Associates. I'm the realtor on the project and also the representative of Aaron Rutan, the owner of the property. Aaron had come to me about 1.5 years ago to do something with his property, and it did have a tract map held in suspense on it, which actually I think that you could build about 30 homes. They could be 2 stories, and you could have ADUs on the back of all of them if you wanted to. But what we tried to do is take this property and we looked at the whole neighborhood and figured out what the concerns of the adjoining property would be. And so we went, instead of going to an R3 zoning, which would be much higher density, like Mr. Clark said, we went to R2. R2 allowed us to build duplexes there. We're going to build all single-story duplexes. Our density is not maxed to what it could be. And we left the property, the approximately 2 acres on the south side of the property the way it was, so we still have houses down there to buffer the property to the south. I did talk to Mr. Clark, and I appreciate what he's saying. I don't necessarily agree to the fact that it's going to impact their property values. It's probably no different than when they built Stockdale Greens across from Old Stockdale, and then it didn't impact the value at all. The street is big enough where the 2 neighborhoods just won't really mix. Regardless of that, what we did try and do is take the consideration in, limit it to single story, limit the density there, and build a project that we thought would be compatible with the people. The traffic, I think Jeff would say, is probably not much more different than if you were to go ahead and develop it all as single-family housing the way it's already approved. Maybe a little bit different there. But we're just asking you to approve this thing so we could move forward and like I said, we'll keep it to something that's compatible with the neighborhood and the houses there. In regards, there was one other person that said something about they were concerned about Eden Drive coming through, that our traffic would go down to Eden Drive. And the study that you saw a minute ago with the duplex buildings up there showed Eden going down through the property, but we don't care. If you told us that we should just block that off, that would be okay with us because we have more than good access onto Jewetta. So with all that, we're here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Does the applicant have any closing statement or comments to make? Would staff like to make any additional comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few things just to kind of answer and give your commission some thoughts as you kind of go forward. So first, I just want to kind of touch base is that the item before you is a zone change. There is no environmental document on here. There is no PD plan. There's no conditional use permit. So you have no conditions. You know, you are very used to having projects where they have conditions that you can incorporate. I'm just letting you know for this particular project, there are no conditions. It's either a, yes, we believe it's consistent and you recommend it forward, or no, you don't, and you provide us with the appropriate findings why it couldn't go through. So I just want to make sure that you guys had that understanding. Regarding the comment on density, I also did want to provide just a little bit of clarification here. So the property has an LMR general plan designation, and the request is to go to R2 zoning. So in our ordinance, and specifically in our general plan, we specifically state that yes, R2 is consistent with LMR, but you can only have a density of 10 units per acre. So while they're asking for an R2, which would allow apartments, duplexes, those other type of multi-story or multi-unit buildings that are a little typically more for renting or for other, smaller units, the density is actually it's the same as if you were zoned R1, single-family residential, because that's how that consistency works when you have an LMR general plan designation. The stuff to the south is still quarter acre, so that's designated SR by the general plan, and so they could still only have quarter acre on that southern portion of the project specifically. And then just in terms of, a potential duplex or apartment complex or things along those lines, we have all those development standards are identified in Chapter 1980 of our zoning ordinance, where it talks about what the requirements are. It talks about the parking clearly. Based on previous discussions, it has to be fenced. There were very specific provisions that were included that the multifamily needs to be fenced. If it's adjacent to residential, they have to have a block wall. So all of the main concerns, including, again, as indicated, this was a single story, but if they were double story and they were within so much proximity to residential adjacent, then the windows have to be opaque. So there are a lot of development standards that are currently been adopted in our zoning ordinance to address and ensure compatibility of these types of units with adjacent single-family residential units. So again, I just wanted to provide that information as part of your consideration and can answer any other questions you have if you do.
Thank you. This hearing is now closed to public testimony, open to the commission for questions or comments. Anybody have anything to add?
I don't have any questions, but I will make a comment. It looks like DeWalt Corporation has provided us some trip rates in our packet. I think a comment was mentioned about concern over excess traffic, and really there's only going to be morning peak hour new trips of 38 and evening peak hour trips of about 43. Overall, for me, I'm supportive of the project, and so when we're ready, I'll be happy to make a motion.
I have a comment real quick. Though I do respect ASU as a great commercial brokerage and stuff like that, as a residential and luxury broker as well, my first gut on this is to say no. This is not the right makeup for this. But the deeper that I look at it and things like that in regards to the compatibility, again, I have real grave concerns with it. But because I know this community, I've sold a lot of homes in that community. And then when we start coming in, we're putting in duplexes, you're putting in more of a higher density and almost like garden apartments almost at that point, though it's not. It gives me great concern in regards to the makeup of that community. And even though right now it's just a blank, do we agree with it, do we not? Because what exactly are you going to put in there? Yeah, we have a makeup, but that doesn't guarantee that that's what you're going to do. It's just, yeah, we're going to change the zoning on this. All right, well, what are we going to do? I would like to almost see, before we change it, almost a plan in place. Says I'm very concerned for the neighborhood of that area, whether it be property values or otherwise as a broker. And that's my comment right now.
Okay.
I just have concerns. I'm not against it or for it right now. I have concerns.
So, Mr. Murphy, I had a question. Mr. Clark brought up the potential for multi-story if they did make that shift to like multi-story apartments. With the zoning that we're going to, what would be the height limitation with something like that if they did decide to go multi-story apartment?
Chairman Nance, through the chair, I believe it's 35 feet. I'd have to look. I mean, it's specified in the adopted ordinance, but my gut tells me that. But I'd have to look the standard as we kind of go through from that perspective. And if you don't mind, your comment brought up something else just to kind of provide some additional thought for your guys' consideration, or for your commission's consideration. A lot of times, especially with the question of we'd like to see the site and the plan and the layout and things along those lines, historically, we have required the PD combining district to be incorporated on any multifamily residential units. We have gone through, because we have this discussion, and hey, we'd like to see what the layout is, and it would have to go through a hearing process to say, yes, we agree that layout is appropriate. If your commission remembers, when we were going through the housing element, there's a lot of concern from the state in terms of, hey, you are now adding extra layers of governmental review and oversight. This is a residential development. You need residential developments. You have adopted standards. You should not be requiring all these additional hearings to facilitate the review and ultimately consideration of these projects. So in our proposed housing element, which we are still working on trying to get finally adopted, we actually have a policy that says we are going to go back and remove all of the R2 PD or the PD zoning on all multifamily residential developments, which, again, it's kind of a catch-22. That's a good thing because it helps with the housing, but then if that's our thought, we lose the ability to specifically have conditions or comments on various site layouts. So I just wanted to let your commission know, the zone change we have is for R2. Your commission could make it and recommend R2 PD, which would require a PD plan before the project could actually get built. And it would, then you'd have look at some of these specifics, the height, where it's located, things along those lines. But also be aware that we have a policy that we're currently working through as part of our housing element that ultimately we would be removing PD on multifamily designated residential development to facilitate. So again, I know your commission's in a tough spot because of that provision and how we're trying to manage this. But that's why staff did not recommend as part of our approval to go to R2 PD, was simply because we have been given some direction to kind of help facilitate some of housing, and so that's why staff is only recommending that portion be zoned R2.
Yeah, and I understand the need for housing. I mean, I own a number of rentals. I own a number of transitional houses. I know I've developed in this area, and I know that we do need housing. But the thing is I really, in this particular community, and I know this community extremely well, I think on a case-by-case basis that I'm very concerned on giving a blanket zone change, and I think I would prefer almost an R2 PD on this in regards to my concern.
Sorry, I just got final confirmation. 3 stories or 35 feet.
Chair, one more thing.
And again, Chair, if you don't mind, if we just give a blanket open, I mean, you can come in and build a 3 stories right there next to single family. And I feel very uncomfortable with that as a person that's in the industry here. And that's why I think that I would like to recommend to my fellow commissioners as well, if we go and recommend a PD on this particular site. That doesn't mean that we're going to change it on every single one going forward. I mean, we do need housing. We need to move forward. We need that in our state. But I think it's going to come on a case-by-case basis, and I think this is one of those cases, in my opinion.
Mr. Murphy, so, I mean, if I get what you're saying, that basically the state's mandating to not have the PDs, you're having to relax the standards? Is it?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there are a lot of provisions that want to facilitate housing. And so one of the programs that we identified in the housing element that we are working, and ultimately we're working toward having the board have final consideration, is I think it's within 6 months of adoption of the housing element, we are supposed to go back to hearing and remove all of the PD designations on all multifamily residential developments. That's how the program reads currently. Now, the board may change that. It hasn't gone through a final consideration, but that was one of the adopted programs that we have incorporated into the housing element to try to address housing need and to facilitate residential development. So again, I can't say today that provision will be adopted. Maybe the board will change it. I just know that that's the recommendation that we have on the moment, and that's why staff did not recommend the PD overlay on this particular project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Nance?
So, this is the last question, Mr. Murphy. If they were going to propose a multifamily, or rather a multi-story residential apartment setup, they're going to come back before this commission again, isn't that correct?
Commissioner Nance, that is not correct.
Okay.
It would meet the development standards. It would be no different than if you, well, I mean, this isn't subdivided, but it would be no different if you had property that were already previously subdivided and they're just building the building permits for the housing. So what would happen is, now there's 2 things, actually, I do want to clarify.
Okay.
The southern half that is being proposed to go to E1 quarter, technically, it's part of the bigger parcel. So if they ever wanted to do the single-family residential units, they would have to go through some sort of subdivision process. And so they would have to create those lots. And so that would require either a parcel map, a tract map, depending on how many they did, things along those lines. On the part that'd be designated R2, they could just come in and get a building permit. Now, it would go through the complete review. Public Works would look at it to make sure that they agreed with where the entrances are at, and it's not creating any safety issues there. Water, sewer, fire, it would go through all of the departments to make sure that it's meeting all the development conditions and that everything is being satisfied, but there would be no further public hearings regarding the multifamily development that would occur on site.
Copy. Thank you.
And Mr. Murphy, what would the scenario look like if the commission wanted to attach a PD plan to it?
Mr. Chairman, it would be no different than it's a more restrictive district. So the recommendation would be concur with staff's recommendation. However, you would be recommending the more restrictive R2 PD on that portion. And then, that request would go to the board. So the board would have the opportunity to consider it as well, make a decision on that particular case. Let's say they do that, and then another request comes later. I mean, it still has to go through a public hearing when it comes to any of those changes. So any removal of a PD would go through a public hearing and that aspect of it too. So I don't know what any final adoption would be. I don't have that policy adopted. It's a proposal that's went through the commission and is before the board. But in terms of your question, what it would be like now,
Or
it would be the standard.
we would just make the motion right
Yep.
now.
And then
with that.
if they wanted to build immediately, or, once this got final consideration, if it was considered and approved with a PD overlay on it, the very next day, they could turn in a PD plan, and then it would go to a director's hearing for final consideration, and we would go through that process up until there was not a PD designation on it any further.
Thank you.
But Mr. Murphy, just to clarify, we could go through that process, and once the housing element is approved, that will be removed.
We would have to go through a legal process to formally remove it. The housing element itself won't just say all of them are gone.
Okay.
We would then go through a process to say, okay, we have this policy. Now, how would we do this? We'd have to identify all the parcels. We'd have to do hearing notices, and we would have to go through a process to do that. Or, for all I know, maybe the recommendation will be changed and say, we're only going to remove it on areas that are committed to doing a certain type of housing or, but it would go through a separate process to remove it.
But at that PD requirement would require them to put a future plan in regards to what their application is going to be. Am I correct?
If the project were approved with a PD overlay and they wanted to build while that PD zoning district was in place, then yes, they would have to prepare a site plan. It would go to a director's hearing, and there would be a public hearing and notice where that would all be considered and discussed before any final building permits could be issued.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Like to call for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we require an R2 PD on this to move forward to approve this.
Okay, we've got a motion made by Commissioner Oliver.
Chairman Dunbar, just for clarification too, that is specifically to the portion that is being zoned R2. The portion that would have the E-quarter would remain without the PD because it's not multifamily.
Exactly. Thank you for that clarification.
Call for a second motion, or second to the motion? Okay, so what's the next move here?
Chairman Dunbar, if there isn't a second, then we go through and your commission consider an addition motion.
Okay.
I should say for the record, if it dies for a lack of a second, then you go through that continual process.
Okay. Make another call for a motion?
I'll make a new motion to approve as recommended by staff.
Second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Commissioner Skidmore, second by Commissioner Nance. Please vote on screen.
Three ayes, one absent, one not voted. Motion carries.
Okay, so item number 1 is approved. Is there any appeal process?
Chairman Dunbar, so yes, your recommendation was to approve the project. This item is only a recommendation, so that will be considered by the Kern County Board of Supervisors, and a separate hearing notice identifying which board meeting that will go to will be sent out and publicly noticed before the consideration occurs.
Thank you. Adjournment, if there's no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.